everyone. Today I'm going to narrate the most important MBA admission interview of my life, which was IIM Bangalore. And if any one of you is wondering why am I saying IIM Bangalore was the most important when I actually made it to IIM Ahmedabad in the end, that answer would be clear to you somewhere around 10 minutes into this video. So I would recommend you to definitely watch it, especially if you have your interviews lined up. It will surely help you understand a couple of things about MBA interviews. And in case you want to dedicatedly prepare, you can also check out the GDPI course that I had made this year for MBA interviews, the link to which will be in the description. For now, I would invite you to the interview room. Please be seated, and in a short while, I'm gonna share what exactly happened in this interview room. So the date was 15th March and it was a morning slot for me. There were 3 panelists, 2 males and 1 female. Upon entering the room, I was asked to be seated, and one of the panelists asked me, "How are you doing, Shweta?" To which I said, "I'm doing good, sir." And then the panelist asked me, after looking at my SOP, that I have mentioned in my SOP that I'm a self-motivated person. So he asked me to share any instance from my life where I portrayed that quality. So I gave an example from my college days when I was feeling a little low because of not making it to the college that I wanted to, and how I kept myself motivated throughout the journey and also for the CAT exam. After that, he continued by reading more sentences from my SOP and asked me about International Space Design Contest, which is a contest that I had participated in during my school days. So he asked me, was I in the science stream? So probably he was expecting that I must have switched from science in 12th to commerce, but that was not the case. I explained that the contest had taken place in the 8th class. I believe that the interviewer was a little confused, so he checked with me if I was interested in the science field during my school, to which I explained that that was not the case. I just went ahead and participated in the contest because of the international exposure and the opportunity to work in a team. After this, they grilled me further on what the contest was all about. So basically in this contest, we had to plan human inhabitation on Mars, and there was an entire project which involved planning their nutrition requirements and also how humans would actually land Mars. So I explained about the project, but there were a lot of cross questions on what were some of the challenges that were there or were expected in this project. And to be very honest, the project was like too far back. I kept fumbling while answering this question. That is what I remember. After that, they asked me whether I like space or is there any recent developments in the space that are there in the news. Of course, I had heard about the Tesla Roadster going into space, so I definitely mentioned it, upon which they asked me about Elon Musk. They checked with me how I think about him and how do I think of him as an entrepreneur basically. So I shared a little bit about him and the kind of ventures he has, and also that he's a very motivated person, thinks out of the box. After which they grilled me by asking, "Don't you think like he's a little too much into everything? What do you have to say about that?" So I told them that every person who ever gets successful, we only come to know about the ventures that actually succeeded. But behind those so many ventures that they had, there must have been so many other ventures that did not actually make the mark. So I said that it's perfectly fine to be involved in multiple things and to have an inclination in those things as well, as long as you know what you're doing and you're interested in it. I also gave an example of Steve Jobs when he was into calligraphy and how he used it going forward in his life. So I shared that even though you are into a field which may not end up making a mark, it will still give you some insights that will stay with you. Then the interviewers tried to change the topic by asking me what was my favorite subject in graduation. So I said marketing, and then they asked me a couple of questions on it. For example, what is branding? How is it different from advertising? What is packaging? How is it different from packing? What are the different layers of packaging? So I believe they just wanted to check whether I'm aware of this topic or not. And I was very interested in marketing as a subject. So I answered all these questions. After which the female professor asked me that there is a common notion that branding, advertising, packaging, they're all the same. Like, I don't understand what difference do they make in my life as a consumer. Can you share how do they actually impact my thinking? To which I said that, ma'am, let's say you are going into a particular supermarket and there are so many products on the shelf. Let's say you have to buy a detergent for you. The moment you see a package which is blue and orange in color and there's a splash in the middle, you would know it's Surf Excel. Similarly, if let's say you're watching an ad on TV and you ever get to see a whitening layer running over the clothes, you would know it's a Tide ad. So even though we may not realize that brands or advertisements actually have an impact in our life, they subconsciously sit at the back of our heads and influence the decisions that we make in the market when we go out as a consumer. Seemed like the interviewers were happy with the answer, at least they were smiling listening at the examples. After which they asked me if I've studied accountancy in my undergrad. I said yes, to which they asked me, so how would you account for branding in your financial books? And I said that it would be an expense, to which I got interrupted and they asked me not as an expense, think of something else. So I thought and I said that whenever that expense leads to increase in goodwill of the company, it would reflect as an intangible asset in the balance sheet. To which they said, when exactly would it become an intangible asset? And I wasn't able to understand his question, so I asked him to clarify a bit, to which he said that, when exactly do you think the expense on branding results in an increase in goodwill and would become an intangible asset in the balance sheet? I had no idea. Still I said that might be when it leads to a favorable impression in the market, and to which they said, no, that's not the right answer, think again. I said, probably when the valuation of the company gets done. To which the professor said, are you sure? And I said, I think so. And they said, you shouldn't be bluffing then. So I said, I'm sorry, sir, I don't know the answer to the question. So then they asked me, have you studied money and banking in your undergrad? I said yes. They asked me, what is money? I defined it as something that's generally acceptable as a form of exchange. And they said, do you think credit card is money? I said, no, sir. And then they said, do you think Bitcoin is money? And I wasn't sure. So this time I said, I'm not sure. And they said, it's okay, take a guess. To which I said, probably, but I don't think there's a regulatory body taking care of it. So I'm not very sure, but it's generally accepted as an exchange. To which they said that, what backing does rupee have? Like, you said that there's no backing for Bitcoin. What backing does rupee have? So I said that RBI authorizes it. In fact, we have governors sign on the currency notes. So they asked me, do you remember what's written on the currency note? To which I wasn't able to recall, and I said, I, the governor of RBI, promised the bearer, and everyone in the room started laughing. They said, are you sure it says I, the governor of RBI? And I was not sure at all. I was like, so all I know is that the governor is basically saying that anyone who has this note, the bearer of the note, I assure you that the amount which is written on the face of the note is the amount that will be paid to you. So they asked me that if I take that note to RBI, what would I get in return? To which I said that I know that money is not anymore backed by gold, so I'm not sure, but probably it could be purchasing power. But then again, I sounded very confused at that point of time. Then they asked me about a recent happening. So Nirav Modi case was prevalent at that time. So they asked me about it. I was able to explain it, but then they probed me further, asking me what is LOU exactly, and is there any other instrument that has recently been announced that could have been used by the banks at that point of time. To be very honest, I hadn't read the newspaper in the last few days, so I wasn't aware, and I told them that I'm not aware of the instrument, but I explained to them about the case in general. So last question that they asked me is that I would state something, I would give you a statement, tell me what is wrong in that statement. The statement was, Stephen Hawking, the Nobel laureate who taught at the Cambridge University, passed away recently. I wasn't sure if Stephen Hawking was not a Nobel laureate or he did not teach at Cambridge. So just to save myself, I told them that I don't know the answer to the question, not being aware that he actually was not a Nobel laureate. That was quite surprising to me. That's what my interview was. They thanked me. They said that you can take a candy. I did, but I don't know. I mean, I wasn't very happy at the end of the interview. Like, I felt like it was a very, very average interview. And that might be something which will give you an indication why this is one of the most important interviews of my life, because the verdict was that I was rejected. In IIM Bangalore MBA admission interview, I was rejected. And there are a couple of insights that I can probably recommend looking back to someone who has their interviews lined up as to what should you not do in an interview. And I feel like it is super important. It's way more important as compared to what you should do in an interview, because it's the only chance you have in front of the interviewers, and in 15 to 20 minutes you have to make a mark. So here are a couple of pointers that I would suggest looking back. The first thing I would recommend is to take care of your physical state of being. Last night before the interview, I did not sleep very well. That certainly impacted how I felt the morning before the interview. So it is highly important for you to sleep well, eat well, take care of yourself. And the second point is to also take care of your mental peace. I know that I was not feeling very confident even before the interview began. I was feeling demotivated for no reason. I was not even interested to enter the interview room, and I just felt like I don't know what would happen. That is because a couple of days before that, I had had my IIM Ahmedabad interview and I wasn't sure if that went well. Don't let one interview impact your other interviews. Take them as separate opportunities and consider each and every opportunity to be important. That will make sure that your mental peace of being is at place. The third point I would recommend is to stay tuned with what is happening around. That is super critical. Like, read the newspaper at least of the day or a couple of weeks before the interview. I did not do that. I don't know why I missed out on reading newspaper before such a critical interview, but that led to not being able to answer some of the easier questions in the interview, and that must have made the interviewers feel I wasn't very serious for the interview. The fourth point is to drive the interview in the direction you want. If you don't drive the interview in your field or in the direction you like, you might be grilled on questions that the interviewers want to ask and you may not be comfortable with. So in the very beginning of the interview, when you are introducing yourself or mentioning a couple of points, make sure that you drive the interview in the direction you want to by mentioning those achievements or extracurricular activities or whatever it may be. Another thing is to make sure that you revisit the interview form or the SOP that you must have submitted before your interviews. I hadn't gone through my SOP. In fact, I had lost it, which made it difficult for me to remember that I had mentioned International Space Design Contest and I had to come up with an explanation for it on the spot. Had I gone through my SOP, I would have known what it is all about. The final thing is to not bluff ever. If you don't know an answer to a question, it is perfectly alright to accept and say that sorry sir, I don't know. It's better than trying to guess or trying to answer it, trying to look smart, when in actual it's perfectly acceptable if you don't know the answer to anything and everything. It's okay. Like, try to simply be polite and say sorry sir, sorry ma'am, I'm not able to recall, I don't know. That's perfectly fine, and it's in fact better than bluffing in an interview. So these are a couple of pointers that I would say might have made a difference to my interview. All in all, I would say just stay confident throughout the interview, irrespective of what questions are being asked. Maintain a composure wherein you are not fumbling, wherein you're not seeming not interested, or you're not seeming underconfident. All the very best to anyone who has their interviews lined up. In case you liked this video, do let me know in the comments. I would love a feedback.